Talking maize and blue here at the Voice of College Football. We got Justin Rowe on the line. And before you get settled here, please like the video, share these videos out on social media, subscribe, check out Justin's work, of course, on blueby90.com, also Wolverine.plus. Justin, how does TCU strike you? We pretty much thought that was going to be the deal. So everybody wanted to avoid Georgia. And we are expecting a rematch. But yeah, TCU, they still get in the door despite the conference championship game loss.
Are Michigan fans also happy to not see Ohio State on there too? I think it's probably a divide a little bit of, you know, there's the people that side with JJ McCarthy who says bring it on, right? He says I want to see that team again. But I would, you know, I'll be the one to go out and say it. I think everybody in the back of their head is thinking I don't want to see Ohio State in that semifinal. Just because here's what I say. It's not because I think Michigan is scared to see Ohio State, but A, it's really hard to beat a team twice. And B, if you lose to Ohio State in the semi, you lose all the momentum that you have built up over 13 games and in 2 wins over Ohio State over the last 2 years. So I don't even think we want the possibility of that right now. Now, playing them in a national title is a little bit different because the stakes are just unbelievable. I said it on our podcast last night. I saw a tweet. I don't think America has the infrastructure for a Michigan-Ohio State national championship. But, you know, what they've got is TCU right off the bat. I think it's going to be interesting. That offense with Max Duggan is legit. They are a very good offense going up against Michigan, who is one of the best defenses in the country. But I would say I think TCU, a Big 12 defense going up against Michigan's offense, is going to be interesting to watch. So is it going to be a shootout? I don't know about that, but I think it could be like a Purdue-Michigan game where it is back and forth for a little bit. It's interesting always when you get to see the top dogs from each of these conferences. Where really are they at when they stack up against each other?
Absolutely. TCU, you got to respect their speed. They've got speed all over the place. I heard a stat here in the last couple of weeks that they've got more players that have been clocked over 20 miles per hour than anybody in the country. Wow. Between their wide receivers and defensive backs. They got kind of a smallish defense that you would think Michigan would kind of lean on, pound on, beat up while hitting plays downfield as well. Yeah, Max Duggan. Got to kind of root for the guy in regards to just heart surgery a couple of years ago. He's fought through a lot. He's been a program player that he's always been fighting to keep the job and be named the starter. Wasn't the starter coming out of camp, gets the job, plays his heart out, does his very best. He's not going to be a great NFL quarterback, I don't believe. I hope he is. You know, I'm not saying that, but that's pretty much the consensus. He's not that type of player, but he's maximizing his skills, no doubt. And TCU and Michigan, if it does come down to Ohio State and Michigan, I just think, if you root for the Big Ten, then you're going to be like, okay, well, then maybe this will be the first time in a long time there could be a legitimate claim as, okay, SEC, move aside. Yes. The Big Ten.
For the first time in a long time, for sure, right? But yeah, to your point, Max Duggan, TCU, very likable team. I don't think you can go into Michigan and be like, I hate them. I want to beat them so bad. They're very likable. I have nothing against them at all, which is like the opposite of what you could say about the other 2 teams in the college football playoff, where obviously you hate Ohio State if you're Michigan, and then you want revenge on Georgia. They're the Goliath that you want to slay. So that's where I think it's going to be a fun matchup. I'm planning to go to Phoenix. I think it'll be a great environment with everybody just kind of not that you're just happy to be there, but I think everyone will be enjoying the game. It's not like a hated rivalry type of thing, which will make it a fun thing and a fun month for Michigan and TCU fans. What I would say too is I see Michigan, like, what's TCU going to do when Michigan lines up with 3 tight ends in a set in the red zone? You know, that's where I agree with you. The way that Donovan Edwards has been running just 1,000 miles an hour downhill, putting his head down, I don't know if TCU can keep up with that. But at the same time, you know, if you flip the script, Michigan hasn't seen, I mean, they obviously saw a passing attack from Ohio State that it was, really, really good all year, but they haven't seen a team with this type of speed outside of Ohio State much. So this defense will be tested, and that secondary will be tested. So it's two very different styles of play that are coming together. It's always interesting to see that when a Michigan's going to just try and ground and pound and keep the ball out of their hands.
Folks, I posted a matchup video. Check it out. Just a lot of stats and figures and comparisons, that sort of thing. But we'll have Justin on a number of times before we kick that game off as we learn more about both teams and set up the matchups. TCU and Michigan, Justin and I could have sat here for 5 hours in the off season thinking of who could Michigan play in a playoff, and we'd have been naming teams forever before we would have gotten to TCU.
Absolutely. That's what makes college football fun too. And I do think that there is something to just not having Bama and Clemson in the college football playoff. It's new, it's fresh. I think having Michigan and Ohio State in it is a fun narrative for sure. But I think having TCU match up with Michigan and Max Duggan going to New York for the Heisman, I will say, I got to give credit to Blake Corum. I think even with an injury, and I'm biased, but he's still the best running back in the nation by far. I think you got to give him that fourth slot. I'm not sure Stetson Bennett did enough to get there. But it would have been fun if, Blake Corum and Max Duggan are in New York going into this matchup as well.
I would have grabbed a few other players before Stetson Bennett. And I got a lot of respect for Stetson Bennett as a quarterback, but he just didn't put up that kind of season. And I would have grabbed a few other players, and Blake Corum would have been at the top of that list. Absolutely should have been there.
And I think it just stinks. I feel so terrible for Blake, because if Blake goes for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns against Ohio State and does the same thing against Big Ten in the Big Ten championship, it is not a competition. He runs away with the Heisman. So I feel terrible for him. He deserves all the praise. I think he had successful surgery. I don't expect him back. But it is going to be a fun matchup here with TCU going back to it. I think, it's two high-powered offenses, and I think it could end up being that back-and-forth game, at least for the first half. And then you got to think that Michigan's going to just do what they do in the second half. At this point, it's hard to bet against that they're not going to clamp down in the second half. They showed it. It's not just a couple game sample. They've shown it for the entire second half of the year.
It kind of reminds me of watching USC and Utah over the weekend, this past weekend in the Pac-12 championship game, where USC's got an elite offense. Their defense has been kind of patchwork together, where they've got some really good athletes, but they haven't built it yet to be sturdy, and they get kind of knocked around, pushed around. Running backs drag them all over the field. They're just not physical to that degree. We may see something like that. All right, Justin Rowe, blueby90.com, Wolverine.plus. Give us some highlights there, Justin, between your two platforms.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of content going on in Blue by 90, bringing on more people to join us podcasters as well. So we've got multiple different shows and podcasts here. And then Wolverine Plus, we've got a lot going on too with the student athletes, with these football players. I know you're not a basketball guy, but we'll be moving into some basketball content too. So it's the NIL platform that we're doing at Valiant Management as well. So excited for all that. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun to be able to talk to these guys. The Eric All situation, with Eric All going into the transfer portal and throwing a grenade on Twitter as he left and got out of there, talking about things aren't always the way they look and the way they seem. Tough look, I think. But I'll say this, the way that Michigan has done it this year, I don't think that there's a culture problem inside Schembechler Hall and inside that locker room. It just seems like you watch most of these guys talk about Jim Harbaugh and interact with him, and the way that these guys are behind the podium after the Big Ten championship, just clowning around. And even on Sunday morning, they're joking around. That's a loose group. I think the Eric Hall situation might be just like a one-off situation. And I, I don't want to say that he's wrong or any, he's probably got his stuff, but I don't think it's a collective thing here. I'm very confident in the culture inside Michigan's locker room and moving forward there.
It's tough to imagine that a team that's been roughly top 10 to 15 in the country and faced the kind of adversity Michigan did here in the last 2 years in terms of trying to slay Ohio State can have a culture problem and not just even play up to its talent level, but then, max it out. You got to have, you can't just have football players that are just playing at, their, a decent level. You got to have complete buy-in. You've got to have, and, that's his experience, and every place is not for everyone kind of thing. Yep. So I got to think, and obviously the highlight of his career, unless you can come up with another one, would have been the Penn State play.
And Michigan doesn't, and I have to give props, sorry to interrupt, but you have to give props to Eric Hall for that game. They don't win the Big Ten last year if he doesn't make that play, right? And we might not be standing here today talking about back-to-back Big Ten championships and beating Ohio State if he doesn't make that play. Tremendous kid. I have nothing bad to say about him. You just wish that he wouldn't toss that grenade and do that, because it seems that the only point that you're trying to make is to stir up drama leading into, the biggest game of the year right now.
Cade McNamara, as soon as he made his announcement, I know that I wasn't the only one who said, Iowa seems like a great destination, man. They could use a quarterback. Hopefully he gets the kind of offensive play calling that's going to help him. We'll see about that. Maybe he goes in. Maybe he made some kind of agreement that maybe there will be some changes. I don't know, but it does seem like a good landing spot. It's a strong program and a stable program.
Yeah, and I wish Cade the best as well. I think there's no secret that it was a tough situation for Cade this year. And I don't think it's crazy to think that he felt slighted, and for good reason, right? I think he wanted, he didn't want there to be, or didn't feel like there should be a QB competition. He felt like he won the job last year and should have had it going into it. But ultimately, JJ McCarthy is an incredible talent, and, it was impossible to keep him off the field. And then, however you feel about J.J. McCarthy's play throughout the season, at the beginning of that year, J.J. McCarthy won that job. And there was no question about that when we saw both those guys play in those first few games. I also would say, I agree with you. Cade, he could be really, really successful at Iowa. And looking at how the Big Ten West is next year, if Eric Hall follows him to Iowa, which I expect him to do, we could see Michigan versus Iowa, J.J. McCarthy versus Cade McNamara in the Big Ten championship game next year. Honestly, if we had to put two favorites to do it, those might be the two favorites to play in that game.
Absolutely. Does this team have any particular transfer portal needs, priorities?
Yeah, I think the offensive line is one for sure. You're looking at the offensive line right now. You've got Olu, who's one of the best centers in the entire nation, if not the best, that's going to be playing in the Senior Bowl. You've got Ryan Hayes, who will be moving on. Zach Zinter and Trevor Keegan will most likely be moving on as well. So you're going to lose probably at least four guys from an offensive line who has a chance to win back-to-back Joe Moore awards. So I expect Michigan to go after some offensive linemen. Miles Hinton, who's Chris Hinton's brother, just entered the portal. I expect them to go after him and possibly land him. I think, if I had to put one position group on it, the offensive line is somewhere where they do need some help from the portal and could go get it.
Justin Rowe, BlueBy90.com, Wolverine.plus as well, joins us on a regular basis to talk Michigan football. Of course, the matchup with TCU at the Fiesta Bowl. Recruiting, National Signing Day, 2 to 3 weeks away. Kind of give us the narrative there where we stand.
Yeah, I think that Jim Harbaugh didn't even come home to Ann Arbor after the Big Ten championship game. He flew straight from Indianapolis to go see Jaden Davis, Eno Etta, and some more of those highly touted recruits that they're trying to get signed. Because I know right now there are a lot of commits that are maybe not going to sign with the team that they're committed to, and it's an absolute chaos right now with the transfer portal, with flips and all that stuff. It's going to be an interesting few weeks here leading up to National Signing Day. I think how I see it is Jim Harbaugh does, as much as he is in a good spot, they need to capitalize. They do need to capitalize on this 13-0 run and get themselves into a top 15-ish class. And, if he goes out and they recruit and they say, hey, you come here, you're going to win a Big Ten championship or play for one. We're on that level of the college football playoff. We're going to, we're looking at a chance to play for a national title. That is meaningful and it's real now. I think you look at it, even last year, nobody really thought that Michigan was going to go play for a national championship, even when they were in the college football playoff, right? Now he can go out and he can say, hey, we're building on something. So what I see is Jim Harbaugh going out there and the rest of this coaching staff, they're all over the country right now trying to build on this momentum and say, hey, you want to come win and you want to play for some championships, you come to Ann Arbor.
Absolutely. Justin Rowe, Blue by 90, Wolverine.plus. Justin, we always appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you.